what is, there's a long title there, Public Information Officer.
That'll work today. Yes, ma'am.
And she's going to talk about clarifying misinformation.
Yes, ma'am. Good after, well, it is not afternoon yet. We've been here a long time, but it's still good morning. Good morning, everybody. And I am here today as your Public Information Officer, and I've been tasked with review of the next section in your book, tab 4. And I'm here to offer some clarification to information that has been circulating in the public with regard to the county budgets, with regard to employee compensation, and particularly with regard for employee compensation as it pertains to law enforcement officers. The issues we're talking about today are important. The issues we've been talking about today are emotional. It's an emotional topic, and they tend to engender a great deal of passionate opinions. We certainly understand that, and nothing we are offering here today intends to discount anyone's passionate opinions or discount their concerns. But we can't let our passions and our emotions govern how we act on these matters because they are critical. These are important topics that warrant very serious conversation, but that conversation cannot be productive unless it's factual. So today I'm going to offer some information. Much of it you've heard in the previous tabs, in the previous sections, but I'm going to offer it in terms of clarifying a misperception that may exist for you. I will start by saying there are a number of things that are indisputable, and that's that knowledgeable, trained employees are a valuable, yet sometimes limited commodity. I think we just spent time hearing Ms. Dillman talk about our challenges, and there are limited resources available to us. It is also indisputable that all of our employees deserve adequate, fair, and equitable compensation. So much of what we do is based upon that premise. It is also indisputable that we have an obligation to use public funds in a prudent manner. Those are indisputable. However, as the issues have played out in the public, there is information out there that can be said to be disputable, and sometimes it's been clearly erroneous, and it certainly merits some conversation and correction and clarification as we all here seek to resolve the challenges. I'm going to review some of the misperceptions one by one, offer clarification. I will occasionally refer to and read portions of exhibits or written documentation. These are found in Section 5 of your presentation book, and you might want to put your finger in that or certainly read it at your leisure after this presentation. All right, I'll start with this misperception. The Board of Commissioners and administration have not done anything to support our law enforcement officers. The sheriff, quoted in the Daily Record and on social media, attributes the loss of employees to lack of support from the board and the administration. We believe it's a bit disingenuous to intimate that the Board of Commissioners and county administration has done nothing to support law enforcement and detention officers. This board, as we've heard, is obligated to make decisions in the best interest of all of our employees, in the best interest of our taxpayers, and with the definitive understanding that short-term decisions can have long-term consequences. And the board seeks to always address challenges in a manner that doesn't cause unintended consequences. You have in your documents in tab 5 a September 2021 email to all county employees from the county manager. It happens to be Exhibit A. And in this, he goes back and refers back to the pay plan, that the market study that was done in 2014. At that time, the Board of Commissioners at that time were presented with 3 possible avenues to resolving compensation and salary compression, particularly challenges at that time. The board chose to implement the largest expenditure. So for county employees, we were looking at the expenditure of $3.7 million to fund increases for county employees over a 4-year period. Given the magnitude of that investment, there were 2 other particular salary study recommendations that would have kept our salaries more current that we were unable to fund. So from 2015 to 2021, only 2 small COLAs and 1 incremental increase was able to happen to move employees from midpoint to midpoint of their salaries. And partially this was due to the pandemic. And I think it's important to add this little note here. During the pandemic, there were a number of local governments that chose to lay off employees. I'm very proud to say, with the good work of our Human Resources Department and the support of our county commissioners, Sampson County did not elect to do that. We maintained all of our employees. We know how valuable they are. We also hear from time to time, well, that's fine, what have you done for me lately? You know, that's human nature. You've done that for me, but what have you done for me lately? So I call your attention to another exhibit in your tab 5, which highlights all of the board's efforts between July 2021 and the present to meet our compensation challenges. And I'm going to, you might want to look at that timeline because I'm going to review it just a little bit. July 2021, the approved budget included a 5% raise for all employees. And then, of course, in August 2021, we did get word, the sheriff did advise us of personnel challenges within the detention center. So subsequently, in September 2021, all detention center employees receive a temporary 10% raise. And staff were given the authorization to prepare an RFP for a market study. You heard from Ms. Dillman the value of a market study to ensure our decisions, that the decisions we implement are long-term decisions that are based upon facts, market facts. In September 2021, the staff reports that the market study can be obtained. However, we weren't, as Ms. Dillman keeps reminded us, we aren't the only local government having these challenges. So the companies that do these kind of market studies were extremely busy. So our market study could not be implemented before July 2022. Nevertheless, the board did authorize the contract for getting the market study, and they authorized it at the same time, knowing the challenges that we were experiencing immediately and currently. They authorized staff to complete an internal review in the meantime to see what could be done in the interim. And then in November of 2021, the board authorized a 2.1% bonus for all employees that was paid in December. Also, in November, the board authorized an across-the-board pay increase for all employees except the detention center because they had previously received the temporary raise, and that would be effective in January of 2021. The detention center's 10% temporary raise was at that time made permanent. Now, the board obviously was showing great interest in our employees because these are actions outside of our norm. It is not the board's norm to do these kinds of salary ranges outside of a budget process. It shows that we understood, the board understood, administration certainly understood, and the board understood the severity of the problem and was making their best effort to begin to meet that challenge. You were doing it outside of your budget process. The motion approving the increase, however, did also require that no additional COLA or step increase would be made until the market study could be completed. So technically, even with the COLAs, we were probably even at that point, and we were awaiting the CPI for 2021, which you all probably remember and unfortunately came back at 7.1%. We also at the time knew that several other counties were getting market data that they probably were going to utilize before we would have ours and be able to utilize it as well. Now, in February of 2021 through May of 2022, the budget process does begin, our favorite time of the year, right? All departments prepared their detailed budget request, of course, the sheriff being one of those, and all of our departments. We do note that there was no written request in that submission to meet for further discussion. May of 2022, the budget message is presented to you with a proposed 5% tax increase. Because of that 5% proposed tax increase and because of the board's previous actions, there was no COLA or other pay raises included. The market study is at that time still proposed. In June, we hold our normal public hearing regarding the budget. Mr. Clack obviously reviewed your budget process, and a public hearing regarding before you adopt your budget is required. The market study is still at that time part of that proposal, and at that time, at that public hearing, there were no comments offered with regards to salary issues. We had, if, I hope I'm remembering correctly, we may have only had 2 to 3 people comment, and it was about the proposed tax increase, not salaries at that time. Board work sessions were held in June. The 5% proposed tax increase was eliminated, and unfortunately, because of the budgetary restrictions, actions on the market study were deferred. Obviously, at that point, I think we were all very worried about supply chain issues and inflation, and obviously about the impact to our taxpayers. Now, we also understand that it can seem that the actions that we take are so broad and comprehensive that it's hard to recognize that oftentimes we do other things at department heads' request to help their department. And that is not different for the sheriff's department. I know that there may be the perception in this perception that we don't do anything specific for the sheriff's department. So I call your attention to Exhibit C in your book. I won't read all of these, but these are examples of actions that administration and the board have taken in response to actual requests from the sheriff's department. In May 2017, we aligned some salaries. In February of 2018, we reclassified a position. In July of 2019, we reclassified all of the detention officers one pay grade as requested to address the hiring challenges of 2019. In November of that year, we converted a vacant position to a temporary clerical position to help paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork involved with payroll. We understand that, so that action was taken to help expedite payroll issues. In December 2019, following a meeting between the county manager and the sheriff, we allocated an additional $50,000 to overtime for detention only. April of 2020, we created a first sergeant position. June of 2020, reclassified another position, and in July of 2020 began paying gap time for all hours worked between 161 and 172 hours monthly. October, approved a part-time certified position. December 2020, again, the county manager met with the sheriff and agreed to certain budget increases to meet identified needs, and those actual needs are also behind this piece of paper in your exhibit. And of course, there are ongoing position adjustments from certified to non-certified and back to assist with staff shortages. So obviously, in our mind, that we are trying, the board is receptive, and we are trying to support law enforcement to the extent that we can. Moving on, there is a common misperception out there that the Board of Commissioners and administration have disregarded the sheriff's plans to generate additional revenues for compensation. There is the claim that the proposals that have been offered have been denied or the proposals have been rejected. This is pretty common topic in social media. In a letter specifically to you, the board, from the sheriff dated August the 5th, the sheriff wrote, "Back in December 2020, I proposed to the county manager a plan to hold federal prisoners in our jail for a fee. That fee should have provided the sheriff's office with the money it needed to pay deputies and guards competitive salaries at no cost to taxpayers. I ran into a bureaucratic stonewall." The sheriff did present a proposal to the county manager in 2020 to hold federal prisoners in our detention center for a fee. At that time, the sheriff was adamant that the recommendations that he put forth be met in their entirety, or he would not agree to the contract. Ultimately, a revised contract was indeed signed. And you might wonder what the administration concerns were prior to signing that contract. At a time when we were well aware of and had been informed of shortages of personnel in the detention center, the question of whether or not it would be safe to increase the number of prisoners housed in that kind of facility is a valid question. Another question administration had were the revenues that were anticipated realistic. And again, obviously, we're beginning to work on budgets about that time. And in fact, in an email to the board in January of 2021, the county manager voiced concerns about an existing revenue shortfall for housing out-of-county prisoners. And he warned in that email that when he's preparing the budget and staff is preparing the budget for fiscal year 22-23, any such anticipated revenues would have to be based on demonstrated receipts of funds. And any shortfall, he warned, would present a built-in challenge going forth into the new fiscal year. As David discussed, or Mr. Clapp discussed in his finance section, the revenues we receive are the county's revenues. They are not specific to a department. While in the budget, the budget will show the revenues anticipated for a department along with their expenditures, the revenues are the county's revenues. And that is, I think the exception, and Mr. Clapp can correct me, the exception to that would be our water system because it's an enterprise fund.
Yes.
So their revenues are theirs. Those are fees specific for that service because it's an enterprise fund. There's a misperception that the revenues that the sheriff generates are being misdirected to other departments. So there's a claim that the federal prisoner housing contract would create the revenue to pay for the salary increases he needs at no cost to the taxpayers. And in response to the Facebook postings, there are citizens also that have made the claims that revenues generated by the housing those out-of-county prisoners are being misdirected for other needs. I call your attention to Exhibit D, which is the budget message for fiscal year 22-23. And Mr. Causey outlined projected shortfalls in revenues for housing prisoners and projected increases in the operating costs for the Sheriff's Department and Detention Center and the net tax support that it was going to take to fund them. And this is one of the times I want to read directly what he wrote. Reading from the budget message, Mr. Causey wrote, operating expenses for the Detention Center and the Sheriff's Department are $4,885,805 and $9,506,848 respectively. The total budget for the Sheriff's Department, including detention, is $14,392,653. The combined proposed expenditures for the department have increased $894,333 over the last year. They do have projected revenues of $3,330,780. Last year, we reported their total expenditures had increased 62% over the last 10 years. We applaud the department for their willingness to enter into a contract to house federal prisoners. Unfortunately, we are projecting $336,891 less in the proposed federal contract for the year. If you take those figures and the figures that Mr. Clack showed you earlier, the net tax support, and that is obviously the expenses, the revenues that were anticipated, including the revenues for housing the out-of-county prisoners, and then you subtract the expenditures of that department, the net tax support provided to the Sheriff's Department is more than received by any other of our county departments. And it's more than is received by our school systems. I think the number was close to $11 million, if I remember correctly. In addition to the operating costs of the Sheriff's Department and the Detention Center, the county, as Mr. Clack explained to you, must pay the debt service on those facilities, including the debt for the additional pod that allows space for housing out-of-county prisoners. The outstanding debt for those facilities is $8,362,185, or an annual cost to the county of $530,000. That's the annual debt service. Moving on, there is a misperception that there are not enough available officers to ensure the safety of Sampson County citizens. The sheriff explains often to the Daily Record on social media and in interviews, right now we have 4 deputies on patrol at night when we need at least 8. It is true that the Sheriff's Department and Detention Center are significantly challenged by vacancies. Ms. Dillman's report highlights that for you. It is a problem experienced, as Ms. Dillman outlined for you, throughout county government. It's a public problem. It's a public sector problem. It's a private sector problem. It's a local problem. It's a state problem, and it's a national problem. And our problems here in Sampson County have not been ignored despite public opinion. In an email to the board in July 28th, 2022, it's Exhibit I in your book, and this probably predates a lot of what we've seen on social media and the recent campaign regarding the severity of the need. The county manager reported to you that there were 47 vacancies in county government at the time, and noting that they were significant in the critical departments that provided public safety, emergency services, public health, and human services. And they were at that time approaching 10% of our total workforce, 10%. He cautioned that this could impact the county's delivery of services and cause increases in expenses and overtime. Now, we spent some time today applauding departments who have been proactive in addressing employee shortages by realigning or reorganizing their available workforce. I think DSS may feel a bit picked on today because we've talked about them a lot, but it is in a complimentary voice that we're doing that because they are experiencing a very similar vacancy rate to the Sheriff's Department. And they continue to meet their challenges by simply reorganizing their department and reassigning work. I would say that the sheriff has embraced this philosophy somewhat. As I'm sure you know, our animal shelter has been closed for the last few weeks and will remain closed for the remainder of September because after we do a clear of the shelter event, we don't have as many animals. So we take the opportunity to clean the shelter and do some improvements. We're installing new cages. So I think the sheriff office has reassigned animal control officers to assist with civil process and assist the grand jury at this time. A very intelligent move, a very smart move to realign, to get services done that he needed to get done. And it works for us because, again, the animal shelter is closed right now. It's probably good to remember that the duty assignments of the Sheriff's Department are the sole responsibility of the sheriff, and he has 95 funded positions, so the possibility for duty reassignments to meet his current identified needs might offer some increased efficiency while this board looks for a sustainable long-term solution. We applaud departments that maximize their available resources. It's a sound and guiding philosophy for budget. There is a misperception that the sheriff has not had the opportunity to present his department's needs. We've talked a lot today about the budget process. The sheriff did write to you on August the 5th, and I quote, "In the past years, I've met with the county manager to explain the sheriff office needs and budget. That did not happen this year or last year. The county manager did the sheriff's budget with little input from my office. As Mr. Clack explained, for each year's budget, the department head develops his request for funding. As you all know, you get a copy of every single thing that we receive in your draft budget. You see it all. The budget workbook is reviewed by the finance officer and the county manager, and they meet with department heads as necessary to clarify needs or to get additional information. Sometimes the county manager will request the department head to come in, but oftentimes the department heads themselves contact the county manager to let him know that they have particular needs that they think warrants additional discussion. Each year in February, this board sits in a 2 to 3 day long session and we talk about the budget. And department heads are notified of those dates, and if they desire, they can come and make a presentation directly to you about their needs, their challenges, what's impacting them for the current year and the years to come. Additionally, any department head can speak in the budget public hearing. As we mentioned a moment ago, we didn't have anyone speak to you at the budget public hearing about compensation. We had people come and ask you, beg you, urge you not to have a tax increase, but I don't recall anyone speaking specifically about compensation. Prior to the budget adoption, even in 2021, the county manager and some of the county commissioners did indeed meet with the sheriff to consider his concerns. And in your notebook, there is, it's not in your notebook, I apologize, we'll add it as Exhibit J, but there's a follow-up email from the manager to the sheriff about what they discussed. So it is evidence that there was some effort made to meet directly with the sheriff. And of course, in preparation of the most recent budget that we're currently implementing, the sheriff's department we do not have any written requests where the sheriff requested a budget meeting with the county manager and the finance officer, nor to present at your budget work session. And of course, no one from the sheriff's department, to my recollection, spoke at the public hearing. I also want to address some Facebook comments, I believe, made by a deputy about meetings of the Board of Commissioners. There was something said to the extent that persons were not allowed in the room to speak at your board meeting. They were not allowed in a board meeting. Except for those meetings held during the pandemic, in which, for health reasons, we didn't allow anyone, and they were virtual meetings. All of your board meetings have been and continue to be open to the public. The majority of them are streamed online. As a matter of fact, a recording of this particular meeting will be available on our YouTube station for everyone to see. There may have been occasions when the meeting rooms were full and the seating was not available, but I cannot recall a single time when the entrance to the room was prohibited. So this board has always taken very seriously the open meetings law. There's a misperception, moving on, the county's budget does not respond to priorities. There was a quote in the Daily Record, the county manager's budget has put us in a ditch that leaves citizens at risk. There is, the sheriff makes a good point in a Facebook response to, I believe, Chairperson Sue Lee, and the quote was, we do need to set priorities and spend tax money wisely. Well, we would offer that that's the prevailing philosophy of this board, using tax money wisely. The county manager and staff prepare, present, and recommend a proposed budget, but the budget decisions are the board's, not the county manager's. And I believe, as your chairperson Lee eloquently noted in a posting one time, as commissioners, you can't be one-dimensional in your budget-making process. You adopt a budget which endeavors to meet both current and future needs and account for external forces such as mandated services that we don't get a chance to say whether or not we provide, and of course inflation, which is certainly on everyone's mind now. The board has noted that your priorities do include diligent work on getting salaries where they need to be, but they have acknowledged in our public meetings that you must also consider the impact of any of those actions on our tax rate, our ability to attract business and industry, and thus create jobs. Now this board and previous boards have demonstrated a willingness to meet the challenge of that balance. Needs, tax rate, needs, tax rate. So there's a delicate balance there. We've talked a lot today about the pay study. People may not remember that tax study was implemented without a tax increase. Remember I told you it was a $3.7 million cost? That was completed without a tax increase. To fund those employee raises, there were difficult decisions made to cut budgets, to adjust employee benefits, Ms. Dillman talked about those, and thus to reduce our long-term liabilities. That was some strategic planning and foresight that was later and subsequently acknowledged and lauded by the North Carolina Local Government Commission and two of our leading bond rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's. Now, people might ask, why does it make a difference what the bond rating companies think of you? Well, it does make a difference if you are trying to refinance your debt. The healthy and stable growth of our fund balance that Mr. Clack talked about, the healthy and stable growth of our reserve accounts, and the decreasing of our long-term liabilities, not only were lauded by the state and the rating agencies, but they allowed us to refinance our debt and saved us millions of dollars. We can actually get that number for you if you'd like at some point, but millions of dollars. We would offer that this kind of prudent budget keeps us very far from, shall I say, landing in a ditch. All right, and finally, this is the last misperception I'd like to offer some comments on. The county manager, this is the misperception, the county manager is overpaid in comparison to other county managers, other chief executive officers, and the governor of the state of North Carolina. There's been quite a bit of public questioning as to whether or not the county manager's compensation is out of line. The Sampson County manager's salary is $161,868. It is commensurate with or lower than the salaries of the chief executive officers of the county's other public entities, be that the hospital, the community college, the two school systems. His salary was established using the exact same market study method that every single salary in our entire job classification system was how it was established. And you can see from the chart you were provided during Ms. Dillman's presentation and the chart that appears again under this tab that his salary is not, despite public opinion, one of the five highest in the state. And it is very market appropriate for our population, our total workforce, for someone with a master's degree in economics, for someone with 12 years of experience as a county manager, and 35 years of government management experience. Now, Madam Chairperson, I hope you'll forgive me for a moment of personal commentary here. And I'm simply offer it from the perspective of someone who's been here for 31 years, and as of October 1st. And one of the few people here tonight who was present and can offer some historical perspective on this matter. I don't think Mr. Causey would call attention to this himself, but it is indeed pertinent to this particular misperception because there are many people on social media who have disparaged the county manager and questioned his commitment to law enforcement. In about 2003, 2004, I believe it was, David could correct me because I think he was involved here. The county was desperate to replace a dangerous, outdated, unsafe jail. The problem at the time was that we needed funding to do that at an interest rate we could afford, at a financing rate that made a financing arrangement that made sense and made the project economically feasible. The facilities that were ultimately built, the sheriff's office and the detention center, would not have been done without the efforts of the foresighted commissioners at the time, but that man right there. Because you see, before he was our county manager, Mr. Causey spent 39 years with USDA Rural Development, and in that capacity, he's the person that found the $10 million to build the jail. Now, that was not something that USDA wanted to do at that time necessarily. They did not use their funding necessarily for detention centers, but he was the person that advocated for the use of USDA funds for the construction of a jail. Now, add to that, at the time, there was also a push to add an additional pod to the detention center. That same pod that allows us to house out of county prisoners, to generate the revenues to offset the debt service for the detention center. And as you can imagine, it was not a very popular request with the board. As you can imagine, it was going to cost us a significantly additional amount of money. Well, Mr. Causey found the additional money, and we were able to construct the pod that the detention center and the sheriff's office now uses to house out-of-county prisoners. So you can say that those revenues would not be possible without Mr. Causey's efforts. Now, I offer all this merely as an example of the longstanding commitment of the Board of Commissioners and the county manager to law enforcement. But most importantly, I offer it as it speaks to the longstanding commitment of the Board of Commissioners and the county manager to making prudent decisions that fit in our budget, because we had to wait until we found an interest rate and a funding arrangement that we could afford. I've offered a lot of information. I'm willing to answer questions if you have any at the time.
I'd like to point out one thing, and I appreciate your longtime advocacy to Sampson County. As a Sampsonian, I totally appreciate it. I've heard intensive comments, read intensive comments over and over about our county manager. I would like to point out at his salary of $161, he supervises 565 people. Never once on social media have I seen a salary for the sheriff who supervises 145 people, and his salary is $102,516. If you look at that comparison, I think you might make an informed decision. Also, one other thing I'd like to point out, it has been referenced on social media a lot that our budget is $174 million. That includes all revenues that are brought into the county from federal and state in addition to county dollars. When we use county dollar figures, that clearly indicates to you that the sheriff's budget is the largest. Sampson County dollars come up to about 70 million of our budget per year. And those are what we work with, what we can control, what we can disperse. The federal and state dollars are mandated.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? But for one, I totally appreciate our county manager. I think he has done an excellent job. Do you have anything you want to say?
I agree. I'm 100% behind him. I appreciate what he's done, and I support him, and I don't think there's anyone sitting up here that would say different. Everything that I've asked him to do, he's been very professional about it, and I think he's been attacked unjustly,
As the commissioner board has, I think, but,
as we all have.
and it's very unfortunate, very unfortunate.
I'm a business owner. I'm a citizen. I do this for pennies. And I don't do it for my health. I do it for the county. I've got a 64-year-old family-owned business. My mom and dad, born and raised here. And I've given thousands of jobs in this county. And I'm doing this so that I can help the county what little bit I can. But it's amazing the number of Monday morning quarterbacks that we have that know so much more, and they've never put their hat in the ring. Try it sometime. But anyway, it's an honor to serve. It's been an honor to serve with everyone up here, and of course, I think Ed's done an excellent job.
I agree. Mr. Causey, moving on to you, perhaps, did you want to give us a timeline? Did you want to share something with that, or you think everything's good on, what would you like to add? Is there anything you'd like to
I
add?
think when I do the summary, I'll make any concluding comments and be receptive to any questions, and I don't know, I suspect you can take a minute break, or I think what I can do, we can do in about 30 minutes. But I think what we're doing now is also extremely important, so I want everybody to be rested and ready.
I'm good to go. I'm good to go for 30 minutes.
One of the things we're doing is we are passing out a copy of the summary notes. And make a couple of comments before we get started. You always need a little levity. First of all, Madam Chair, I apologize for my phone ringing. But at the same time, I tell you that I have known Chris Rayner for 13 years, and not once has he ever suggested that I was technologically proficient. Not one time. The summary, the information in what we're doing and in the discussion, one of the criticisms that the board has been receiving, I as the county manager have been receiving, we have not been moving fast enough. If you go back to the beginning comments of what we made, look at all that the state and nation is going through. We've had the pandemic that we're coming out of. We've got supply chain issues. We got inflation issues on there. As individual questions come up to the board, I think it would behoove us to create some context to make sure that not only the board has the opportunity to see a concise representation of some of those challenges, but to be able to put it in context and make sure that if there are other challenges, you know those as you direct us to move forward. So that is in context. So in order to do that, to whatever it is, we've got to understand it. We have made no recommendations in here whatsoever as what's to be done. We intentionally did not do that. We want you to have the opportunity to look at the circumstance we've got, think about it, and then if you want staff to make recommendations, you might want to think about the parameters for which we are moving forward. So this is that. The other question where you're talking about the comments that the county manager has received, I won't say I'm used to it, but it has occurred before in my tenure. And most of the people making the comments, you don't try to judge them or let it set you off your course too much, because, most of the time these people do not have all of the circumstances, and if they would understand all of the facts and take the time, they may have a different persuasion. And I will admit, those people that have all of the facts and want to come in and have a conversation with me, I would be glad to listen and do that. So it's just a matter of what it is. So I do prefer living under the radar. I will be the first one to tell you that. But that being said, after nearly 50 years in government service, you learn to put things in perspective. And if you think you're on the right path, Mr. Godwin, generally things will help it work out where the truth will be known. So going back, now point number one is we have not made recommendations. Number two, the board has done a very good job of supporting all county employees and all citizens of Sampson County. Although there continue to be significant needs, we need not overlook what has been done in recent years for everyone. The record indicates that Sampson County government has been a strong supporter of law enforcement for years. Everyone supports the adequate funding of law enforcement. A recap of the salient points will follow. What we're saying is, all we want to do is create a level playing field. We're not talking about what needs to occur in the future. We'll be glad to have that discussion, but let's don't get confused with the needs, with the future, with a distorted view of what has occurred in the past. So let's start with the budgetary, and I'm going to go through, because all of these are the things, Madam Chair, that when we get into the budget process, these things, regardless of what you choose to do on any other emergency issue, are going to be there for consideration. And I want the full board to have all of these things in mind as we move forward. David talked about the audit. I think he said that we were at 34%, which is just shy of the 39% recommendation. I would tell you that's in the range of being pretty good. Do we have work to do? Yes, we do. But to sit here and I think that sort of tells us that maybe the roads are getting wet, but I don't believe we're in the ditch yet. Normally, the county appropriates $1.9 million to balance the current budget being developed. These monies are generally not expended because we limit the use of lap salaries, and that's something we want people to understand. During the 2021-2022 fiscal year, the board approved $2,385,000 of personnel and salary expenditures that will be included in all subsequent budgets. That meant, folks, that with what we did, and the county administration was a part of it, and we were trying to accommodate a variety of concerns, that we appropriated or we obligated this amount of money that was not budgeted, that when we knew that we came into the July 1st budget this year, was going to have to be included. The facts are simple. Total expenditures for annual recurring operating expenses would not be considered other than during normal annual budgeting process. Here again, our point being is when you get into going into the general fund for non-budgeted items, Mr. Godwin, what we're saying is you have those occurrences, whether you're repairing a roof or that emergency that comes up or potentially a land purchase or something that you can consider. It is always good to question whether we need to be appropriating money that's going to be a recurring annual operating expense. Not telling you can't do it. I am telling you that it's generally not a good idea. We projected $450,000 for Medicaid hold harmless revenue in this year's budget. We expect to receive less than this projected amount. Mr. Clark and I have multiple conversations during the year about what's working good and not. There's not too many years that come by that we're jumping for joy and counting all the extra money that we're going to have. Changes to sales tax rate must be approved by the legislature and then approved by the county. There is a misperception. If we want to change that, we just change it and keep going. It doesn't work quite that way. We do expect We do not expect increases in sales tax at the same rate as seen in the last several years. David, I believe if I'm correct, we have projected at least $1 million of additional sales tax in each of the last several years.
Yes.
I have some question that as the federal money slows down and all the monies are not being made to families as been in the past, I've got some concerns that those sales tax monies are not going to increase as rapidly in the future as they have in the past. In evaluating budgets for departments, we're most interested in the net tax support from local dollars. The people that I talk to, including the commissioners, you're interested in what your tax rate is. You're interested in how many tax dollars you have got to pay. So likewise, we come up and we want to look at net tax dollars. And when people talk about, in the community, talk about the expenditures being made, they're interested in the net tax dollars when they're talking about departments. For example, social services total budget is $16.3 million. However, their net county tax support is $6.3 million. 31% of our department budgets are comprised of salaries and fringes. Transportation and the water department are the only departments that do not receive net county tax dollars. However, it should be noted that the water department is part of Public Works and they do receive county tax dollars for the maintenance of buildings. We offer that clarification so nobody thinks that we're trying to skew what is going on. The Sheriff's Department and Detention Center together do receive more net county tax dollars than any other county department or school system. That is factual. With Medicaid expansion, the county will be required to have sufficient number of workers to process the cases. At present, we receive a 75% reimbursement for Medicaid workers. This will likely be reduced in subsequent years. I would be surprised if I'm not having conversations with you in the spring at length about the effects of what's going on in the Medicaid programs. With Medicaid transportation, we can expect reimbursement from trips to fall $152,000. The projected $910,000 needed for building the reserves was not included in the budget. The question is, we could ignore it next year, but at some point in time, that's going to be like the 800-pound gorilla. It's going to catch up to you when the expenses come our way. We did not include approximately $120,000 needed to cover the property revaluation that is done every year. Inflation and supply chain challenges continue to be a challenge. The current rate of inflation is approximately 8.5%. The cost of vehicles needed for the transportation department have increased by $25,000. Delivery dates have been pushed back by 18 months. We expect that gas and vehicle repairs will be more than we budgeted for many departments. I can tell you in the course of the spring, David and I went back and forth on what we were going to project for gas fuel. It went up, it came down, it went up, and finally we just threw a dart on the wall and decided that's what we would do. That's not quite the case, but it's only a projection. The budget for the new emergency facilities building includes 76% in grant funds. Except for grant funds and grant funds restricted by all revenues earned by the department or revenues of the county. Generally, extra revenues received help to offset net county tax support. Human resources. Questions or comments on any of what I've said to this point? Okay, I'm going to keep cruising. Human resources. The county had 50 vacancies as of 9/1. These vacancies occur across all departments. Multiple departments have recruitment challenges. We have got the evidence that supports that. We are all concerned about any employee whose work puts them at risk. Nancy went into great detail, and there's actually a graphic in your folder that told you. So yes, we are very concerned about all of our employees who at any time are at risk, be they a deputy or a detention officer or whomever it might be. Numerous counties and cities received COLAs in 2022 after our January increase. Many departments work very proactively to deal with both program challenges and personnel shortages. For example, DSS, with plus or minus 150 positions, works very diligently to realign staffing to current needs. Personnel shortages in the Sheriff's Department and other departments is a regional, state, and national problem. It does not appear with the comments that I am seeing, and I'm not a Facebook user. Unless somebody shows them to me, I don't pay a lot of attention to it. But that's something I think seems to be confused. Money can be a limitation. However, it is not the only limitation in recruiting a stable workforce. And I think Nancy talked about that at length. Market studies, when utilized, are a good tool for achieving as much consistency as possible among all positions. Much has been said regarding the county manager's salary. I don't think I need to speak to that anymore. Over the last 4 years, the Sheriff's Department, including Detention Center, has lost 95 employees to retirement or job termination for other reasons. DSS has lost 105, and certainly that is a concern. The Sheriff's Department, excluding Detention Center, has 95 positions. Of these, 48 are classified as deputy sheriffs. EMS has 52 full-time and fluctuating part-time positions. 47 of these positions are full-time paramedics. The county is paying $885 per month per employee for health insurance. There was no increase in premiums for the base plan this year. 379 employees did select the buy-up plan. When the county refinanced much of our existing debt service several years ago, the state treasurer lauded the county for vigilance in looking after employees in the 2015 plan, as well as the long-term financial stability of the county with its deliberate and responsible decisions regarding a multitude of benefits. Let me share with you the humor in that meeting. Mr. Wooten was the chairman at the time, and he was our spokesman, and we were sitting in the room, and we went up for the presentation, the hearing, and David can attest to this. They were going down the line, and they were just zipping people with negative notes. They even called one group that didn't show up to reprimand them on the telephone. And we were sitting back there, why don't we just go home? But as it turned out, our presentation was mailed, and the state treasurer was the one that actually was very positive about the things Sampson County had done and helped us get the clearances we need. The Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department should be lauded for their efforts to reduce their overall net tax support from the county by advocating for a federal contract. All employees, including the Sheriff's Department employees, received significant salary increases between July 2021 and January 2022. These included a 10% cost of living increase and a 2.1% bonus. Detention officers received an additional 5% increase. These amounts do not include partial step increases that many employees receive. Had the county been able to make a 2% cost of living increase this past July, we would have been on par with the needed cost of living adjustment since October of 2015 pay plan, with the exception that the CPI for 2021 came in at 7.1%, so we were behind 8 ball. We have included 14 additional actions that have been taken since May 2017 to benefit the Sheriff's Department. The net tax support that was budgeted for the Sheriff's Office is more than $11 million. This is after factoring in other revenues received. These are property taxes and sales tax receipts that come directly from the citizens of Sampson County. This amount does not include the portion of debt service the county pays for their facility. These monies account for more county tax dollars received than any other departments or school system. There is probably more misunderstanding about this than anything else. And this, folks, we have checked and double-checked and rechecked. This is pretty much factual. The estimated debt on the Sheriff's Department building is $8,362,000. The estimated current debt service is $530,000 annually. This is additional tax support. The existing debt on the Sheriff's Department facilities is greater than the final debt on the Emergency Services building will be after completion. The Sheriff's Department, including the Detention Center, had a 62% increase in operating expenses over the 10-year period ended 2020. They received a 6% increase this year. This year, county administration, with the blessing of BOC, advocated with the state to obtain an additional $1 million in funding to provide storage facilities for the sheriff. We acknowledge that adequate staffing is a challenge for the Sheriff's Department and multiple other departments. The concerns are real and need to be thoroughly evaluated. Well-managed departments also evaluate and determine what they can do to continue providing effective services. The above clearly demonstrates that the BOC and county administration have established a clear record of supporting all departments. We will continue to provide this effort. It is our goal to not only support all departments and partners, but to do so in a manner that demonstrates real concern and interest in the citizens of Sampson County. I've got two basically editorial comments that I would like to make. Actually, three. For those of you that might be interested in how the budget process works, Chairman Lee and I must have spent 10 or 12 hours in discussions on what to do and not. And I will admit those conversations were often very robust, weren't they, Mrs.
Extremely.
And she commented one day, she says, "It is amazing how we can have such a wide-ranging discussion and not necessarily agree and still be civil and professional." And I took that as a compliment, and I thank her for allowing me to voice my views as we went through. The second thing I would like for people to think about, particularly your audience, if you look at what was done, let's go back to January of 2022. At that point in time, you had already done a 5% increase. The previous July, you had done a 2.1% bonus. Because we couldn't get in the market study, this board made the determination that they wanted to do something to help everybody. And we talked about the use of debt and going into the general fund, but this board made the commitment that they wanted to help all employees. And so you graciously agreed to a 5% increase in January, knowing that was going to have an impact. However, at the same time that you did that, you also said, when we do this, now we're not doing any cost of living increases and we're not doing any step increases until after we get the market study. So time is moving on. This is 9 months ago. We're going into the budget season. Well, at this point in time, anybody that was familiar with what had been done knew that the mandate that Clack and I had for putting the budget together, there was not going to be any COLAs and there was not going to be step increases. You done voted and told us not to do that. David, I guess when it's something adverse, I need to say I instead of we. But in any circumstance, a 5% tax increase was recommended. After much discussion, it was decided that that tax increase was not going to take place. And let's talk about just a minute why. The fact of the matter was, the board said with all of the strain that was on all Sampson County families, the fact that the pandemic was reducing, the fact that people were suffering, the fact that people were trying to work out their incomes, they just did not think that a 5% tax increase was the thing to do. Well, if you look at what happened after that, I haven't had too many people, Chairman Lee, that told me, well, sure, I'm sorry you didn't get that tax increase. I believe one of the newspapers actually lauded the commissioners for the efforts that they had done. At the same time, I do point out there was a wide opportunity for people to have discussions with us about the needs, because this was over a 2 or 3 month period. It did not occur until this past July. Now, without question, please understand, and I want the press to make sure, we are not dismissing the challenges that anybody has by any means. In fact, the challenges need to be considered and carefully evaluated. Our simple point in all of this is we need to get on a level playing field and look at what needs to be done in the proper context of what has been taken up until this time. Quite frankly, I would have to applaud the Board of Commissioners for the things that y'all have done in the last couple of years and the dedication you have had to getting things done. The second thing, the last thing that comment, and then I will sit down, is there may need to be some understanding between defunding and underfunding and funding. If, in fact, number one, defunding means you have had a decline in revenue or a decline in expenditures or budget. That has not occurred. Secondly, my job is to create a budget, okay? I want you to look at the department heads that are sitting here, and I'd like to get a raise of hands of everybody that's gotten everything they wanted every time they submitted a budget, including the community college. Okay, if you have gotten everything that you have wanted during that process, The point being is we are the representative of the commissioners at that point in time, that we have got to define a budget that is acceptable to not only you, but hopefully to the citizens of North Carolina and Sampson County. We take that job seriously. That responsibility entails that sometimes we have to make decisions and clarifications and draw the line. And that is a job that I understood was my responsibility when I got here and will continue to be. But hopefully nobody will construe whatsoever that because we have a difference on a budgeted line item that they do not have our full support. That is just an erroneous conclusion, and under the circumstances that we work, it can't be. Sometimes, Madam Chair, when we start the budget process, y'all will denote for me what is acceptable and not, and then David and I, the department heads, will try to come up with a budget that fits those parameters. That concludes my remarks, and Madam Chair, I will entertain any questions that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I truly want to commend our staff for the excellent job they've done today. It's been a lot of hard work, and they've done an excellent job, and we support them as well as we do the entire county government. We want the best. If there's nothing.
Can I say something?
Sure, please.
I live 18 miles out of Clinton. I'd be a fool not to support law enforcement. And I think if you ask them, I have. Everyone on this board is a Sampsonian. We have no implants up here. You go to all the other counties, you're gonna find commissioners that are from somewhere else. Everyone up here has nothing but the best for Sampson County on our mind, and we're going to continue to do that. I applaud each department of Sampson County and what they do, the people that work here. I applaud the sheriff's department, what they've done, the effort they put in, the sacrifice they make, the first responders, everybody. So we're here to support. The problem we have, as you've heard, are all the obstacles in our way financially. And we've got to figure out how to do that. That's our job. That's our job up here. It's not going to be perfect, I promise you that. But I can tell you this, we're going to do our dead level best. I promise you that. Thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to recess to reconvene on September 26th, 6 p.m. and receive the Sampson Regional Medical Center Board of Trustee meeting and budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you so much for attending and for your love for our county.
Good job for all this shit.